Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with Fabian Bravo, the winemaker at the Brander Vineyard in the San Ynez Valley. Fabian, welcome, and tell us about the Brander Vineyard.
The Brander Vineyard is located in Santa Barbara County in Los Olivos. We're in the Los Olivos district, is an AVA, but we're technically in the town of San Ynez. It's a small community with 5 different townships, but we've been located here, founded by Fred Brander and his father in 1975, and our winery, tasting room, and vineyard all in the same place.
Wow. So are you 100% estate fruit?
We produce several wines that are estate grown and estate produced, but we do buy about 30% of the fruit we need to produce the volume that we need to produce.
Wow. So speaking of that volume, how much wine do you make per year?
About 15,000 cases, an average.
Which is on the large size for this region, but still not a huge winery. And of those 15,000 cases, what grapes are you working with? I mean, I know Sauvignon Blanc is sort of Fred Brander is known as the king of Sauvignon Blanc. So what else beyond Sauvignon Blanc?
So you're right. One SKU of Sauvignon Blanc makes up 2/3 of our bottling. So we make 10,000 cases of one wine, Sauvignon Blanc. But we also produce, on average, between 6 and 8 different Sauvignon Blancs. And then additionally, we produce several different white wine varietals like Riesling, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, blends of those varieties. Like we have a blend of Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. We have another with Riesling, Pinot Gris, and Sauvignon Blanc. We also grow Semillon. We also grow Muscat, Sauvignon Gris, and Petit Manseng, all in the white wine. So overall, we probably make about 80% of our production is white wine. Mm-hmm. And then on the red wine side, we work primarily with 5 varietals, focused in Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cab Franc. We also have a little bit of Malbec and a little bit of Syrah grown on the estate.
Wow. It's a lot of grapes, a lot of whites. I mean, I never realized that. I mean, I always think of it as a Sauvignon Blanc house, so that's amazing. And where are your wines? Are they found across the country in certain markets, direct to consumer?
Today, we're mostly focused with California. I've been at Brander since 2007, and in those days, we were probably maxing out at 10,000 cases. And we were spread out with different distributors throughout the country. We also had some wines going out to Germany. We still do Japan. But today, most of our production stays within California. Most of our sales stay within California. We have a pretty healthy wine club and obviously a pretty busy tasting room. So we do most of our distribution in restaurants and retail, and again, focus mostly Southern California, but we have some presence in Northern California too.
And let's talk about you. You grew up in Northern California, in Watsonville. I'm wondering what your first memory relevant to wine is.
Old, warm wine kept under the sink.
Oh, no.
Where my parents, of course, were always told aged wine is better. So apparently what they thought was a good dark place to keep it was under the sink where you constantly run hot water. And so the very few experiences was trying to drink some of that stuff. And of course, often really bad tasting. But at the same time, obviously Watsonville grows grapes. They've been doing it for a long time. And overall, eventually from Watsonville, I moved to Salinas. And then from Salinas, I did most of high school and some middle school in Gonzales, which is in the middle of the San Jose Highlands. Eventually, I started tasting wines that were really well known and of great quality, and met some of the growers of that area.
And clearly, it wasn't the warm under the sink wine that turned you on to this.
No.
So since then, when you think of all the wines that you've tasted, is there one memorable wine that pops out? I'm sure you've drunk a lot of great wine, but one of those aha moments, and I'm wondering what that wine might be and what the occasion was.
Keeping with there's lots of them, but keeping with the theme with Sauvignon Blanc, Fred, I would call it fortunate, was good friends of Didier Dagenot, knew each other well. And I remember when I first started working here, Fred would often, and still does, share older wines. But I remember having like a 93 Silex, and this is probably, I don't know, maybe 2010, and thinking, wow, Sauvignon Blanc can be this. And, you know, it was wonderful, but that was, great wine.
Putting a challenge to you to see what you can do with your 8 different Sauvignon Blancs.
Exactly.
So if we were to come to your home, what sort of wines would we find in your home? What are you drinking? Are you drinking mostly local? Do you drink only your own stuff, or from other places?
We have a lot of local wine. It's a pretty friendly community. We trade wine often. I drink some Brander wine. I've often have not kept it in stock, and people come over and how do you not have? So now I try to keep some of our wine there at home. But often white wine. It feels like there's more occasion within warm California to drink white wine. You feel you can go through glasses and eventually bottles a lot easier. But a varietal that we don't make that I really enjoy is Pinot Noir. And so, and probably because I don't taste enough of it at work, it's usually an after work type
Which
of wine.
is great because you live in a region that has a lot of it available.
Yes, it does, and lots of friends who produce it, and they're tasty.
Oh. So, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
That's a rough question. I'm going to stick with Sauvignon Blanc. I think there's many facets of it. I'm biased, of course. I love the idea that you could do stainless successfully, that you can do it in barrel, that you can do it in amphora or concrete, that you could do skin contact, no skin contact, that you can take it through malic or not take it through malolactic fermentation. You can do lees contact, skin contact, and it all changes the wine in many ways. You can pick early and keep it really bright and fresh. You can wait a while and get tropical tones out of it. So yeah, you can see green profiles that are signatures to Sauvignon Blanc, and then see passion fruit and sort of a guava profile if you wait a little longer. So I love working with it. I'm fortunate. I'm in a good spot that I enjoy. We typically try to keep every lot that we pick separate from the estate and other vineyards. So we'll have maybe 35, 40 tanks of all separate batches of Sauvignon Blanc. A good time to come taste in the cellar is typically December through January, when things are finally getting a little settled down. The CO2 is dissipated some, and you're starting to see through the wine a little bit. But just seeing sort of the progress through harvest, the early picks where they're really lean and bright and fresh, and some of the later picks that are a lot more round and wholesome with more concentration. So it's kind of cool to see that sequence and the progression through that harvest.
So I'm going to jump on that about harvest in just a second, but it's really interesting to think about how, perfection, in a way, using that word, is seen as a grape that has so much diversity, that it can do so much. Doesn't seem like there's something you can't do with Sauvignon Blanc based on what you said. So that's really cool. So I'm curious, as a wine drinker, red, white, or rosé?
Wow, that's a rough one. I would say white wine. I drink more of it. I'm a fan of all of it, from fresh varietals to richer varietals. I'm a fan of wine, and so, but I find myself drinking white wine more often, so I got to go there.
Yeah. Still or sparkling?
Still. Sparkling's fun. You open in celebrations. It gets the party started. But yeah, I can see a lot more through a wine when it's still.
Mm-hmm. So, understanding wine, a lot of people turn to wine critics. They turn to scores. We were talking before we started this about, the Wine Spectator Top 100 and how you get to taste those every year at a party. And I'm wondering sort of what your opinion is on wine critics and scores. And do they play a role in your winemaking or your wine drinking?
They also love wine, and they have a place in the market and in sales, and they enjoy what they do. They obviously got into it for that reason. They're definitely influential in what people buy and what people sell and then buy. You take it with a grain of salt, like anybody's opinion. We tend not to make wines in that direction. Not solely for scores. Mm-hmm. We often pick pretty lean and pretty bright, which is often not received with high scores. We also tend not to do the extreme to release wines that are, as much as I enjoy them, but we also don't go to the extreme and do 12% alcohol wines. Mm-hmm. And so we really drink wines that we enjoy when they think they're ready and well balanced. I don't have a criticism to the critics. They have a place.
You just make your wine the way you want to make it.
Exactly.
So speaking of that, for somebody who hasn't had the privilege to taste the Brander Vineyard wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Piece of history. I think it's a staple not only within San Ynez Valley, but in California. There's a lot of history here. Our last vintage was our 45th vintage of Brander. This next one, 46, obviously. But a lot of first ofs. I mean, Brander has made Sauvignon Blanc, obviously, commercially longer than most people here, or if not all. But we also been making Semillon for a long time, longer than most people. Cabernet Franc, probably the oldest Santa Barbara County grown fruit here for Cab Franc. Again, Sauvignon Gris, I don't know often people who grow that. And then more recently, I think it was 2015 that we planted Petit Manseng, also inspired by Didier Dagenot, Fred's mentor. He was making some from Jurançon, and that's also been fun to play with.
Huh. So in terms of, these different grapes that you're making, and, we of course, people should come and try them for themselves. But when you're drinking them or other wines, how do you approach pairing them with food? Do you just open what you're in the mood for? Or do you think there are rules people should follow when it comes to drinking? I mean, if you're making 2/3 white wine in this house, are you eating a lot of fish? Or do you think that white wine has more versatility? How do you pair food and wine? How do you approach that?
I do consider it. I often, when I'm at a restaurant, one of the hard things to do is you sit down and a few minutes later you're asked by the server, and I'm grateful for it, but you're asked like what we're having to drink. And it's so hard because it highly depends on what I want to eat. Mm-hmm. And yes, I can get started and drink a glass of wine before dinner, but I also don't want to I gotta watch myself through the night. So I often say I have to hold off and say, give me a few minutes, let me look through the menu real quick and kind of at least try to narrow it down to a few dishes where I might go, and then I'll place my wine order. Mm-hmm. So that I can line it up. I'll probably have a couple of glasses, but appetizer, salad, or whatever dish early on can have one wine, typically white wine. Uh-huh. And then I might switch over to likely a red wine, but is it Bordeaux? Is it Pinot Noir? And it highly depends on what I decide to eat that day.
So kind of weight with weight in a way. Lighter dishes, lighter wine, bigger dishes, bigger wine.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And watching tannin, obviously a bigger dish that can handle more tannin. But you're right. Weight is a huge part of that.
So if space aliens were to land on the property right now, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with and introduce the Brander Vineyard?
Do you mean which bottling or which varietals?
Which bottle?
The Au Natural. It's our estate stainless version of Sauvignon Blanc. It's been produced at Brander since '96. We tend, at the end of the day, it is the winemaker's preference. We look at our favorite picks of the year from the estate for different reasons. It can be acid, it could be aromatics. I mean, that's a big part of it, aromatics, but also weight and texture. We tend to exaggerate a little bit on those lots with lees contact and skin contact, and try to give it a backbone with a little tannin extracted from the skins. But again, to create a balanced wine, I mean, we cherry pick our favorite pieces, put it back together, and it's a wine that it's my bartering chip when I trade wine with winemakers. So it's received well, and so it's usually the wine I like to bring to a gathering of some sort. Yeah.
So a good introduction to the winery. I've had a few bottles myself and held on to them because they're pretty delicious. So now you said that 70% of your production is coming from the estate. How many acres planted do you have?
About 41.
41. So I'm sure you spend a lot of time in the vineyard walking through. You've been here for a number of years. I'm curious, we know that every vintage tells a story, and every vintage there's variation. But in your time here, or time making wine and growing up among vineyards, how much variation do you see? Do you see more commonality? Do you see big variation from year to year? What have you been finding?
Both. I think commonality and quality, I think wines have gotten way better. All varietals. We've had a chance to experiment and play around and screw up enough wines and and talk to each other about what works and what doesn't. But also, it's kind of cool, at least within Santa Barbara County, to see the diversity of things, working with new varietals, experimenting with processes that may not work, but we're still excited to try. So, yes, I've seen varietals that you'd never heard of or seen, and then trying to track it back to where it originally comes from or where it's grown, and trying to get some of those examples, not necessarily to copy, but at least to give us some guidance. And so, yeah, both. I think both commonality and quality, but also seeing a lot of exploration in it too.
And then vintages vary, so that it kind of makes you play a little bit with Mother Nature there. So when you're out in the vineyard, are there signs that you look for that are going to tell you what kind of vintage you're going to get?
Yeah, yields is one. You obviously want a healthy yield because you want to produce wine and you need to produce enough of it. But you got to watch, you have to have control of that. That definitely has an impact on quality. So you want to make sure that your vines are not overproducing. But there's the health of the vine. I mean, if you look at the canopy and if it looks healthy and lengthy and sort of have a vibrancy in the vine, it's usually a good sign. You want it to photosynthesize light. You want the leaves to be open. And so all those are good signs for it. There's obviously more farming practices or knowledge that you want to avoid. You don't want high winds and rain during bloom. You don't certain things, you don't want frost after bud break. Certain things that are logistical things that you want to avoid, but they're out of your control. So obviously running into those roadblocks is difficult. You can't do a whole lot about it.
Right, and those come and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? But
exactly.
But you know what to do. You've been doing this long enough.
we remember those vintages, and they're stapled in my head. For me, 2008, 2011 were difficult frost years. I remember our yields were way down, and you learn certain things about them. Like on dry years, you expect them, you find the wines maybe a little harder, more graphite and pencil-led direction for Bordeaux varietals or Cabernet. That could be a good thing, but too much of that is also makes the wine a little one-dimensional. So, that's the cool thing about agriculture and wine making and wine growing, is that every vintage is a little different, and you look forward to seeing what comes out of it.
Absolutely. So when you're spending time, working through a vintage as the season progresses and you're walking through the vineyard and you've got 41 acres to wander through plus a few others to visit, what kind of relationship do you have with your vines? Do you communicate with them? Do they communicate with you? Have you scolded them at times or praised them? Do you talk to them?
You're right, there's a little aspect to that. Some of the older vines I feel like need a little more care and a little more encouragement to keep going. Some of the blocks were planted in 75 or 76, and they need a little encouragement just to keep on going. I don't want to see them go. They don't financially make sense, but it's pretty special to have that, an opportunity to make wine from those. And then there's some areas in the vineyard that are we barely water, and they are so vigorous in their canopy that I'm always just like, just tone it down a little bit, Like
wild teenagers, you're
right.
Like, stop.
We often have to hedge it because it grows out of control, and you're just like hoping that they stay within control.
So one more question about kind of harvest and vintages. Do you and your team have any rituals or good luck things that you do at the start of harvest to kick it off? Any, champagne toasts or no shaving for a period of time, or anything that you think will help you get through that harvest?
I think we've done some of those. We always have champagne at the beginning of harvest and drink lots of wine through it. That's a good one. I've tried the no shaving. I'm kind of looking a little scruffy now. Not on purpose. I have a 2-year-old that doesn't give me time to do that. But often we have to weigh grapes. So we bring the scale down, and it almost becomes an automatic that the cellar crew always wants to weigh themselves as a goal to we're going to get a little leaner through harvest because we're going to be working long hours, eating less, unfortunately, and working hard, so we lean up. And often we do combinations of let's weigh each other together and as a goal, lose weight together. So we've done that goofy stuff.
Well, harvest is coming when everyone weighs themselves. And when harvest is over and nobody wants to get on a scale because they somehow ate and drank more than they thought they would, that's when it's over. So when you were a little boy, what did you want to be when you grew up?
A little boy,
or a young man.
A young man. I feel like I did it. I didn't stay there, but I always wanted to be an engineer. English is my second language. I was probably 8 or 9 when I learned English, so I spoke mostly all Spanish. And school I did really well, but it wasn't easy. But the one place that English wasn't a barrier was math. And so I did really well in math. And eventually I went to Cal Poly and graduated as an electrical engineer. And that's what brought me to Santa Barbara to work at Raytheon. And I actually really enjoyed it, but I felt like that wasn't the final place I wanted to spend the rest of my career and go day in and day out. So did a little exploring and eventually landed here.
Wow. from electrical engineering at Raytheon to making wine in the vineyard. Very different. I mean, I guess there's some overlap in the skills of science and math, but So when you're not working, you have a 2-year-old, so maybe you don't, but what do you do in your free time if you have free time?
Well, often my wife and I would just go hiking. There's some pretty cool areas here that you can do that easily to get to without too much commitment, and you can go short or you can spend or do a few miles. That's one thing we enjoyed.
I like how you say enjoyed in the past tense. I guess with a 2-year-old, you don't do that anymore.
No, you don't do a whole lot. Going out to dinner was a big one for us. I probably did dinner at a restaurant over 50% of the time for many years, and I knew that would change once the child came out, and probably why I held off for so long. But no regrets, it works. We're going to attempt to do a restaurant tonight. It hasn't happened often, but we're going to take him out and see how the good night goes.
Well, I wish you luck. My next question will not apply to your dinner tonight because your son, right?
Yeah.
Will be with you. But I'm curious if you are going out for a romantic or at home making a romantic meal, you and your wife. What sort of wines make for a romantic evening? And I'm sure that won't be tonight if you have a 2-year-old with you. But imagine it was a romantic evening. What would you be drinking?
For us, it's probably a Barolo or Nebbiolo. We're fans of Italian wines. I mean, all wines, really. But Italian wines have always been special for us. And then we were fortunate enough to go on our honeymoon in 2017. And great trip. We rented a car and visited mostly wine regions and did lots of tastings with a lot of producers.
In Italy?
In Italy, throughout the country, mostly in Barolo and obviously Tuscany or Chianti. But then in other areas too. And then, fortunately, the following year, without any plans, we ended up going back and spent equally amount of time also enjoying wine and food there. And so on both of those trips, we brought back plenty of wine, more than we thought we could fit in our luggage without breakage of some sort. And that's romantic dinner. It's usually going to be probably Italian themed or with an Italian wine.
I love it, especially a wine that you brought home with you, so it holds an even more special meaning. And hopefully it tastes as good here as it did when you were on holiday.
Right.
So when you look back and you think about, or when you look today at your work ethic or how you live life, is there a piece of advice someone gave you along the way that you carry with you? I mean, we're given advice by lots of people, and some can be about how to live life or how to, how to work, or maybe it's wine specific. But is there one piece of advice that comes to mind that's just with you almost every day?
No, I think it's a mixture of things. The typical ones, just try to find something that you really like doing. And I had to try a few things out more, I think, than a person at that age is in my 20s. And I would think I'm pretty lucky that by the time I was 30, I was able to find something. But I don't think there was ever any pressure with my parents to stay rigid and don't leave engineering. It usually was, you got to do something you really enjoy. And so, there was some exploration there for a few years on what I wanted to do. But now that I do this, I definitely enjoy it. During work and after work, a lot of perks to it.
Yeah. So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Well, recently my wife and I started our own little brand, and it has our last name, Bravo, in it. and it's called Castia de Bravo. We have made wine under Bravo Wine Company since 2012. Very little, a couple hundred, usually 100 or 200 cases. So just 2021, we decided that we'd take it up a notch, switch the label to Castia de Bravo, and have yet to release the wine. We're about to in about a month. And I think that's pretty exciting. Don't have plans to leave Brander. I think that's always, we'll be here and make both wines at the same time. But I think that's always been, I think, a motivation or drive to most winemakers to create your own brand. And even though you put your heart and all your work into the brand you work for, which I do, it's always nice to see that you could work with different varietals and don't have to put your boss in the pressure of trying to sell it. It's on you.
Take a little pressure on your own shoulders. So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A chair without a leg. Awkward, yeah.
That's a good one. Making sure my chair here is stable. Okay, we have another imaginary situation. Now is the creative time for you, okay. So I know. We're sitting at a table, we're enjoying your wines, but there's an empty chair next to you. If there was one person from any walk of life, living or deceased, who would you want to share a bottle of your wine with?
So pretty cool. And there's a lot of people that come to mind, some family, some mentors. It would probably be just somebody in my family. My grandfather, my dad's dad, I think, didn't drink much, but I think it'd be really cool to just sit down and just share something that you've created and namesake, and so I think that would be pretty cool just to enjoy that. Obviously, there's a lot of famous people that come to mind too.
What's one famous person that comes to mind?
I've still like a scientist too. And I don't know if they drank or not, but I would love to have conversations with something like, I don't know, Thomas Edison. I mean, that's still part of me, and it'll never go away. I mean, it's still electrical, it's still engineering, but he did a lot, so it'd be really cool to...
We can put two chairs at your table. Yeah. So we're going to play a little game now with our pairing wine and music. After all, it's called Wine Soundtrack, so we've got to make a soundtrack to the wines of our lives. So based on the wines that you're making, I want you to pair it with, you can go general, you can go specific, whatever comes to mind that either the wine makes you think of this kind of music or you'd want to be listening to. So I want to start with the Sauvignon Blanc au Naturel, the one you would give to your aliens, the one you like to share with friends. What do you think?
A lot of dimension to that wine. I don't stop listening to Gary Clark Jr. now, and there's so much richness in his music, and so I would probably go there. What song though?
Can you give me a song there?
I gotta say it was probably When My Train Pulls Up. It's just so rich and so much to it and so many layers. But yeah.
I like it. And then what about the Brander Cabernet Franc? You said you were one of the first people to plant the grape. Obviously, something that has a history here. What do you think about that wine?
A classic, I guess. Cool question. Just to peg it down to... I would go with sort of in that direction too, but Leon Bridges, I love his music, and I'd go there. Like, to me, that music is crosses decades. Like it has a lot of music from classic music in today's world. Yeah.
Well, I would go down into all of your Sauvignon Blancs because you have 7 or 8 different types, but I'd have to taste them with you. Otherwise, I can't hear the music in my own head. So I will take the pressure off of you and not make you do any more songs. And I'm going to have you one last question. Yeah. It's kind of a two-parter. The first is, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore next?
It'll probably be Germany. I haven't been. I love Rieslings from that area. Gotten close, but never quite made it. But yeah, that's the top of the bucket list.
Top of the bucket list. And for others, their destination may be the San Ynez Valley. And if they want to come here and visit the Brander Vineyard, how can they visit you? Where can they find you? And what can they do if they find you?
Well, ideally, they would stay in the San Ynez Valley and make it easy for themselves. So yes, we're only 40 minutes north of Santa Barbara, a couple hours from LA, and a fun place to visit with lots of restaurants and a few places to stay.
Mm-hmm. And the winery specifically, well, let me ask that again.
Yeah. You said, where do you find the wine?
No, how do they visit you guys?
Correct, thank you.
So for people who want to come to the San Ynez Valley and find the Brander Vineyard, where can they find you? What will they find? I mean, this is actually an estate. I mean, so it's not just a tasting room, but what can people experience when they come here?
Well, like I said earlier, the cool thing is that the tasting room, the winery, and the vineyard are all in the same place for a long time. And we're really close to the town of Los Olivos, so there's a few restaurants there. But we're off the main highway with the 100 or the 154. So you can take the 101 or the 154 to get up here from either north or south. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're about 40 minutes north of Santa Barbara.
And so come here, and there's outdoor tasting and indoor tasting. You can. Are there any particular experiences you offer? Anything unique that people should look out for?
Yeah, so we offer tastings, mostly outdoor today, and then on weekends, specifically on Saturdays, we have live music, and we've had live music for a while, and that's been a popular thing. There's a lot of outdoor space, so we can do things in the main courtyard where the music's at. If you think it's too loud, you can still sit further away and enjoy a glass of wine with whoever company you come with. So there's a lot of little spaces throughout the winery.
Great. So a great weekend activity, although midweek is fine too, but a great weekend activity coming up to the Brander Vineyard. Fabian, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. I know, lots of weird questions, but you did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. And thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's go drink some Sauvignon Blanc.
Let's do that.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.